Hey there, Rednecks Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. And today a video that is based on a lot of questions which I get is, what reloading equipment do I use? So today I'm going to do what I hope at least is a short video, basically and briefly going through all the equipment that I use from cradle to the grave in how I process and reload all of my brass. Now, I'm going to say at the outset that this is not an endorsement of any particular piece of equipment. This is just the equipment that I find that works for me. So we're going to get into it, and I'm going to offer some brief thoughts on each piece of equipment. In some cases, I'll give a kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, but for the most part, like I said, this is just basically what works for me and what I use. If it helps you out, great. If it doesn't, well, hopefully at least the video was entertaining. So let's get into it. Okay, so after I've finished shooting, having fun, now comes the work. For each bag that I reload, I tend to put a label on there. This is one of my old labels. I don't use this anymore, but you can see it was for my M1903 Springfield, the date that I loaded it, the caliber, the number of rounds in there. Whether I neck size or crimp, I don't neck size anymore. Maybe I'll make a video on that one day. The bullet weight I use and the powder and weight that I use. These days I generally use a pretty simple label. It's just date reloaded, what it's for, and caliber, and number of rounds in there. I basically know what my loads are, so I don't really bother doing that anymore. For the rest of the rounds, okay, they're in there, and as soon as I put them in one of these buckets to be processed, I create one of these labels. This is what I use, and this basically allows me to keep track of what I've done to this brass, because sometimes I have different brass, and I lose track of where I am, the caliber, the rifle, and basically all the steps in reloading. And I follow this kind of through the reloading process. So obviously I put my trim lengths, the powder I'm going to use, and the bullet length for that particular bullet. These days I generally use Hornady bullets, so I basically follow their load data. That is the first step. Okay, next up is depriming the brass. I'm not one of those people that uses a dedicated depriming tool. There's nothing wrong with using them, by the way, if that's what your preference is. For me, personally, I prefer depriming on the bench, and I use a Lee universal depriming tool. I find it works great. It does every single caliber that I load. That's it. There's nothing to it, nothing fancy. So that's how I deprime. Okay, next up, cleaning the brass, because you do have to clean your brass, contrary to what people say. In my case, I use the Rcbs ultrasonic cleaner. This is the older version. I know they've come out with a new one, which I think is actually larger than this. I find this is fine. So yes, to answer the question of how I clean my brass, I use an ultrasonic cleaner. I don't tumble. I don't use, the steel pin wet method or anything like that. I'm not interested in shiny brass. It doesn't shoot any better than non-shiny brass. The only concerns that I have are getting the brass clean, inside and the primer pocket particularly. So that's what I use, the Rcbs ultrasonic cleaner. Is it perfect? No, I find that it does clean some brass better than others. I find brass that's particularly sooty. I know from personal experience, 6.5 Jap, it comes out really sooty out of my rifle, and it doesn't really do the greatest job in cleaning them. All other calibers, though, I found that it does an absolutely perfect job. And yes, mine is on because I'm about to actually do a load of 30-06 brass, which you saw earlier in the video. So, do I like this? Yes, for the most part. I have occasionally thought of getting a tumbler or a use the wet steel pin cleaning method. To be honest with you, this does the job just fine. So I don't believe in complicating things if they don't need to be complicated. So next up is the resizing portion of the reloading process, and I use a Lee Classic Cast press. Now I know there are religious battles as to which brand of press is the best, and everyone knows that the blue presses are the best and the red presses suck. You know what? I've been using Lee presses for years, and I am capable of reloading sub-MOA ammunition with them. You know what? For the price that I paid for this press, and that result is good enough for me. So this is basically what I use. I'm very happy with it. I chose this press in particular because it is capable of taking large size dies that you need for reloading things like 577 450. Most presses aren't capable of taking those dies. This one is, so that's why I chose this press over others. And I mean, the price was right. It wasn't particularly expensive, and it does the job just fine. And it's very well built. It's very solid. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. As for dies, I tend to use Lee dies, but in the past I've used dies from other companies as well, like CH4D, and I can't even remember the other ones. Hornady, probably. I can't remember. All of them work just fine. They're not the equivalent of the really high-end dies from companies like Lee Wilson and Forrester. That's fine. Those are worth the money that you pay for them, and if you do buy those, fantastic. I find Lee dies work just fine. So that is how I resize my dies. The Lee Classic Cast Press and dies mainly from Lee. Okay, so the next step is trimming if necessary, and I use, and this may come as no surprise to you if you are a frequent viewer of the channel, the Frankford Arsenal Universal Precision Case Trimmer. This trims almost everything that I load, and I'll get into what I use for that one darn cartridge that I cannot use this for. I've done a review of it. There's a video up on the channel from a couple of months ago, so I won't go too deep into this, but I really do like this. I get very consistent results from it. As I said, it handles every caliber that I reload, with the exception of one. And it's pretty good. I really do like it. It's money well spent. I have been mulling over upgrading to the Frankford Arsenal Platinum Series Universal Trimmer that has multiple stations on it, but I can't really justify the cost, especially since I only bought this a couple months ago. It works fine. It's great. Now, the one thing that it does not do is straight wall cartridges, and I reload 30 carbine. So I am forced to continue to use this, the Hornady Camlock Trimmer. And I use this, again, only for straight wall cartridges. It works fine if you use it for all cartridges. The one thing that I didn't like about it is that you need a separate case holder for each caliber, and it's proprietary to Hornady, so you can't use your case holders from other manufacturers, which annoy no end. However, it is what it is. Yeah, so I use this and it works fine. Only for 30 carbine though. Finally is the chamfering and deburring portion, and I use, and again I've done a review of this, so if you want to go and find the video, is the Hornady Case Prep Center, and it's got 3 stations. I've got it set up for primer pockets for large primers, because that's generally what I load most of, and the chamfering and deburring tools. And it works fine. I have had no issues with it. Again, I've been mulling over that Frankford Arsenal Universal Platinum Series thing, which would have both trimming and chamfering and deburring on it, but to be honest with you, the system that I have works now, and I'd just be spending money just for the sake of spending money. And if you've watched my videos in the past, you know gadgetitis is the single biggest reason why people never break even on reloading. So that is my trimming procedure. I'm using the Frankford Arsenal Universal Precision Case Trimmer, this for chamfering and deburring, and this only for straight wall cartridges. Okay, next up, the throwing of the powder. And my primary method of throwing powder is with the Lyman Gen 6 powder thrower. I really like this unit. This is one of those things that I would recommend if you ever want to step up from using a manual powder thrower. This thing is great. Some caveats about it. It does throw powder slower than a lot of other electronic powder throwers, and even Lyman has since introduced a quicker one than this, but this works fine. I have no issues with it whatsoever. It does tend to have problems with shortcut powders, specifically 4831 shortcut, which is actually mentioned in the manual as an issue. Other than that, I've never had a problem with it. It works just fine. It does tend to throw powder a tenth of a grain lower than the specified charge, but if you're one of those precision reloaders who likes to trickle up to their desired charge, that's fine. I actually think people actually choose this one specifically because of that. Then they can trickle up. One of the features it does come with, which I really like, is a lot of powder throwers have problems with extruded powders. This thing comes with a little screw-in insert, which allows you to more accurately throw extruded powders. I know a lot of people use that McDonald's straw trick. Well, this actually comes with a built-in straw trick if you want to use it for that. Other than that, I really like it. I do recommend this. One day I'll do a review of it. I've been meaning to do a review, but I haven't. Speaking of trickling up, I do have a Hornady Trickler, which I use on occasion. Not often, but you know, I bought it just in case I need it, so works just fine. I've got an Rcbs universal powder funnel. In here are various attachments for various calibers, assuming I can figure out how to open this, that you just put at the end of this, and it allows you to specify which caliber you're funneling powder into. It works fine, no problems. Absolutely necessary, not at all. But I like it. And finally, for those days where I want to go old school, which is not often, but you never know, I use a Lee powder thrower. I believe this is called the Perfect Pour or whatever it's called. It's like $20 in Canada, probably not much different in the United States. This is the best money you can spend for a powder thrower when you don't want to spend a lot of money. This thing is awesome. I love it. It's one of the few things I have left from the original Lee kit that I bought many, many years ago. This thing works great. I have it set up for a specific caliber, but I cannot remember what I use this for. I may end up using this for my 577-450 because I tend not to throw a lot. I don't feel like cleaning the powder thrower just for 10 or 20 cartridges, so I may set it up just for that. But this is great. It works fine. And if this is your primary means of throwing powder, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. I think it really is good. It works fine with ball and spherical powders. Well, they're the same thing. Flake powders, all that stuff. With extruded powders, it does tend to cut the grains occasionally, but that's fine. I mean, I think all powder throwers do that. Any powder thrower that I've used, a manual one, cuts powder when you're pouring, so it's not a big problem. I mean, I don't understand why people get upset by it, but it is what it is. At any rate, those things are what I use to throw powder. Okay, I'm going to dispense with showing you how and what I use to seat bullets and crimp rounds as part of the final process of reloading, because that's the press and that's the dies, which I've already shown you, so I won't bother with that. However, I will show you some of the other equipment that I use. Now, I have reviewed these in recent months, and these are the calipers that I use. Calipers, an absolute necessity when you reload. Don't think that you don't need them. I use the Origin Cal Calipers. I'm very happy with them. They work fine. I've had no issues with them whatsoever. I highly recommend these if you need cheaper calipers that are good calipers. Now, if you want expensive calipers that are also fantastic calipers, you know, Mitutoyos are the go-to. Everyone loves them. Do your research. However, I find these work just fine. Now, manuals. I have a huge collection of manuals. I just pulled this one out just for reference sake. This is the second edition 2019 revision of the Lee reloading manual. I also have, looking over, the Lyman manual, the Hornady manual, and a bunch of Hodgson manuals going back several years. Have more than one manual. Don't just rely on one manual, and don't rely on people's load data from the internet. Do your own research. For each caliber, I do index the page so that I can look quickly for them, because it's a pain in the ass to try and find them when you need them quickly. That's what I use. Manuals. Make sure to use them. Occasionally I have to swage primer pockets, so I use the Rcbs primer pocket swager tool for if I have military calibers that I need to swage the pocket, I mean. This is great because it does both large and small primer pockets, and you do this on the press. I know some people prefer the non-press mounted versions. That's fine. Again, it's based on preference. I don't have to swage a lot of rounds, so this works just fine for me. My biggest need for this was when I was reloading 223, and obviously a lot of that brass, particularly from places like Lake City and that, but even some commercial manufacturers do require a swaging of the primer pockets. So that's what I use for that. And because only God and my mother are perfect, occasionally you make a mistake and you have to pull a bullet, I use the Hornady Camlock bullet puller. It comes with, you can buy different little collets for different calibers. I believe this one is set up for 223 right now. I haven't used it in a while. Basically, it's press mounted. Load the bullet, or the round, sorry, into your press, lift up, cam this around the bullet, and then just pull back down, and it should, if you've done it right or you haven't completely scotched it up, pull the bullet out. And that's what I use when I make those mistakes, and it happens. I think I haven't used this in a year, except like 2 weeks ago I screwed up around, so I had to pull it. So it does happen on occasion, even if you've been reloading for many years. And that's it. Those are some of the other tools that I use in reloading. And that's it. That's what I use. Hopefully you found this video vaguely informative and interesting. If you did, great. If you didn't, my apologies. Hopefully it wasn't too much of an investment of your time. As always, I hope you have a great day, and may all of your shots ring true.